Citizens of Earth, Bills fans specifically, happy Victory Friday. We have gotten to witness two Bills wins in the same week, which is a treat for us all. And the most recent of the two wins was a little bit more stressful than the first. And I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it sounds like Jalen Waddle converting another third down. I don't know. Maybe that was just in my head. But what's not in my head is tonight's episode as we recap this very entertaining bout with the Miami Dolphins, another AFC East victory for the Buffalo Bills. We'll go over the good, the bad, and what we thought was the ugly from yet another matchup. And I appreciate each and every single one of you for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. And without further ado, the host will be quiet and he'll let the intro play. Let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
Happy Friday evening, everybody, and thank you so much again for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter /X at show_DeRosa. And I should have made tonight's tagline Fighting Through the Pain because just mere moments before we went live, I dropped the Sprite that I was going to drink during this show, and the can is extremely dented, and now it is annoyingly difficult to drink, which means I'm probably not going to pick it up for the rest of the episode. And if you haven't noticed, folks, this is the first time we have been live in quite a while. Again, schedule changed, new location, caused a new commute, made it a little bit more difficult to go live as consistently. But when you got a Thursday night game, you got to talk about it live the next day. And on this show, you know I always have a guest with me, and returning to the fray is one of my favorite people to get on this show. One of my favorite blue ethereal floating orbs specifically, the one, the only, Mr. Bruce Nolan. Bruce, welcome back to the show. I appreciate the heck out of you for being here. How are you doing tonight, my friend?
Joe, it's a party. It's a party all the time, my friend. Disco balls, dancers, dubstep, the whole thing. Thursday night games are a situation where I feel like I'm a little bit more okay with staying up late than I am for Monday night games. Because you're like, my wife and I have this thing we call Thursdays pre-Fridays, right? So you go to pre-Friday and you have to stay up late, you watch your team win, and that's okay because tomorrow's Friday. And so it's okay. I feel acceptable. It would not have been as much fun if the Bills would have lost to the Dolphins. So I'm glad that we don't have to talk about that.
Yeah, no, I'm very glad that despite, again, the ugliness, the stress, it was still a Bills win because we could be talking about a very different outcome today. And it's a good vibe show regardless of what we may critique. And I like that you call it, that you guys have the name for it because my personal favorite name for Thursday is Friday Junior. And it's just gotten especially in the more recent changes to a lot of people's work schedules with a lot of people on hybrid schedules where they get to be home from work on Fridays, that Thursday just hits different now. And it hits even more differently when your team gets a win. So it's good vibes today. And again, I appreciate you. Shout out to David, Mr. Foxy in the chat, Joe and Bruce on a Friday. Hard to get much better than that. It is indeed hard to get much better than that, folks. But Bruce is carrying here. He's 95% of why you're all here. He's the man, or the orb, I should say. But Bruce, again, a game that was not nearly as, I guess if you want to call it stress-free as the previous AFC East matchup. This was a game that was a lot more taxing on the mental health for a lot of Bills fans, evidently proven by Twitter, which again, I tell myself I won't go on in the middle of a game. Then I do. And then I get angrier. So I need to stop doing it because it keeps happening. But it definitely was a game that seemed to be starting to shape out like a blowout. And then it changed pretty dramatically in the second half. But Bruce, I mean, just give me your overall thoughts on this game, the takeaways, the biggest ones at least that you have from it, and something that you're going to carry with you going into the next matchup against the Saints.
There are two main takeaways that I want to talk about for the game. I think I have 4 or 5, but doesn't make for a very good podcast answer. So we're going to narrow it down to 2. And the first one is this. I think this is how Patriots fans felt when Tom Brady was a Patriot about the Bills. I posted on social media after the game my heart rate over the course of the
Oh,
entire
I
game.
saw that.
And the joke, of course, is that it doesn't, you can tell it doesn't even move. The
Yeah.
entire time, it is almost completely flat, right? And the joke of that of being that at no point was I concerned overall that the Bills were going to blow it because the Bills have won 12 of the last 13 going into the game. Now it's 13 of the last 14. The Dolphins are finding a way to dolphin. When you turn your team into a verb and that verb is a negative, that's the status that you've reached. Oh man, I guess they're just going to Bills it up. That's what we used to say. Oh, it's such a Billsy loss. Oh, we had the Patriots right where we want them. Tom Brady didn't even have that good of a game, and somehow they still won. That's what
Yep.
we said over and over. That's what Dolphins fans are saying to themselves about the Bills this week. It
Yep.
is, you know what? We had it. We had a shot right there, and yet all of a sudden we have this special teams penalty, and then we threw an ill-timed interception. Do you remember all the years where we would call the late game Ryan Fitzpatrick interception? We would call
Yeah.
it the Fitzterception. It's the same thing, but now it's Tua turn the ball over, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the way it is. So it's the strange mirror image of Bills Patriots that it used to be for, sorry, Bills Dolphins that it used to be for Patriots Bills. So that's my first takeaway, and I think it's interesting. The second one is that I understand the idea that there's not a transitive property for victories and losses in the NFL. It's not one of those things where, well, the Bills beat the Jets and the Jets beat the Chiefs and the Chiefs beat the Ravens. Therefore, the Bills are better than the Chiefs and the Ravens. Like that's not how it works in the
Mhm.
NFL. It really is a week to week league. But I think one of the big stories coming out of this game is the third down defense. And I think that that's a trend at this point. And it's not a trend for Sean McDermott. It is a trend for Bobby Babich. And I
Mm.
think that's a conversation that probably needs to be had, not because it was bad this game. It was bad this game. But you can no longer sweep it under the rug and be like, oh, well, it was a isolated incident. It's a fluky thing. It's a week to week
Yeah.
league. There's a trend here for Bobby Babbitt's defenses on third down and not being good on third down. So I do think that there's something that we should probably talk about in regards to that because this is not an isolated data point. This is a trend. We're past the trend mark. Trend is like a 3-game mark. We're past that. And so I think that this is a reasonable conversation to be had about this defense and third down under Bobby Babich.
I am so glad you brought it up because that's probably the main pain point I had from last night's game. And I think it's the main pain point that pretty much the entire fan base had from last night's game. Although there was some significant contention about Josh Allen's passing chart, which I don't know why people were upset at that or Josh Allen's numbers yesterday because he seemed very efficient and very methodical in his approach. And a lot of pre to post snap high IQ decision making from Josh Allen that I was a fan of. So we'll get to that when we talk about the offense a bit more. But starting out with your main point, I mean, I want to start with real quick your first takeaway because I think it's so funny that you say that because that thought came into my mind yesterday because with the track record that you're seeing from Sean McDermott and Josh Allen now to the Miami Dolphins, it is eerily reminiscent of those kind of head in the wall games where the Bills kept running into that brick wall of the Patriots during the drought era and they couldn't beat them. And the funny thing is, like all these years later, everyone remembers Tom Brady's record against the Bills, but they don't remember like the detailed games, like that game where the Bills were up 21-7 going into halftime, or that game where the Bills took them to the fourth quarter. And then it took like I think there was like a late game interception from Fitzpatrick. There were numerous moments where they're in it until they're not because they beat themselves. And you're seeing that happen now. And it's just crazy that we've come this far to a point where we can look at it in hindsight as a valuation for a current matchup rivalry we have that they are on the right end on. And I'm happy to be in that position. But it is funny because, like, I can't sit here and tell you that Miami didn't play a good game yesterday. With the way they were being spoken about going into this game, people were treating it like the Dolphins were going to lose 50-0. I'm not joking. I saw people say, man, they're going to slaughter us. Like, we have no chance. And I'm like, look, I watched both of the games that you guys played against New England and Indianapolis, and the Indianapolis game was awful. But the New England game, that was a back and forth. And if Achane never stepped out of bounds on that long run, Miami wins that game, and they're 1-1 coming into Buffalo. So I feel like the narrative around them is very hyperbolic, not saying that they don't have issues, but that this team is not this like walk like all over them, step on them, they're dying and they're going to not score at all. They still have a very explosive offense. And they proved that at points yesterday. I mean, again, it was more of like we don't want to take too far down the field. We know what the Bills are trying to do. We're just going to try and exploit speed and space. But they did a pretty good job of it at points. And it really took Tua just misreading his play. And I don't even know if it was as much a misread or just a really well-timed play from Terrell Bernard that led to the Bills taking over and winning that game. But I didn't think this was going to be a walk in the park, and it proved to not be. But going to your second takeaway, Bruce, the third down defense is an issue, and I completely agree. I think at this point, it is perfectly fair to criticize it and say, given last year and given all of the evaluation from our network and around the Bills space of how consistent the Bills were, one, generating opportunity to get off the field on third down, but not coming through with it on third and long, that now that you're seeing it happen again with a divisional rival that, while yes, you have beaten them, you've gotten the best of them, they have weapons, and the teams that you will likely face in a playoff run are going to be better versions of that team. It is fair to criticize this third down defense. It is fair to say, I am worried about it, and I am worried about it. And to cite the stat that Anthony put out yesterday, in this game, Miami converted 10 of 15 third downs and numerous occasions where the ball went to the same player. And I'm just sitting here like, at some point, you have to figure this out. And I understand game plan. I understand limiting explosives, taking down the field away, not trying to get beat over the top and just making them have long drives. But you have to get off the field because this team does still have explosive pieces. And that is a valid point of concern when you get to the Kansas City Chiefs, when you get to the Baltimore Ravens, when you need to just get a stop, get your offense back on and take control. You got to stop them, and it's not happening consistently enough. And I don't like seeing it, and I'm hoping it improves. But I think, Bruce, to your point, it's okay to start wondering, when is Bobby Babich going to really hammer this home and fix this? And he acknowledged it today and said that he has to be better in that situation. But when are we going to see it is a very fair question. So anything else you want to add before we get into the detailed parts of this game?
I'm glad you brought up the Josh Allen passing chart. I love that we're at the spot with this offense and with Josh Allen where the Bills can put up 31 points and we can be like, what the heck? But if you have that exact game every single year, every single game, you're like the greatest offense ever. I'm okay with the points being scored because that's the goal, is score as many points as you can. And so if you end up scoring, 30 points a game, there's not a lot of circumstances where you can come out of that and think that your offense is to blame. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't meat on the bone, but there's meat on the bone in almost every game ever, unless you happen to be playing the New England Patriots and you score a touchdown at every single drive and then you kneel down and end the game. Like that, the perfect game. And I don't think you're going to have a perfect game. So I think that the timing of when the offense went cold is really impacting people's overall vision. I think that's really what happened, is that they went cold while Miami was converting all those third downs, and emotionally those two things combined together to give you that level of anxiety. I think if you would have seen the 3-and-outs from Buffalo not happen consecutively, like if you would have had 3-and-out, touchdown, 3-and-out, touchdown, I think people would have felt very differently than touchdown, touchdown, 3-and-out, 3-and-out. And so I do think sequencing matters from an emotional standpoint, but it doesn't always necessarily matter from a logistics standpoint. Like if I score 50 points in a game, does it really matter if I scored all 50 in the first half or if I scored all 50 in the second half? I scored 50. You know what I mean? So for me, I think that I understand, but my level of concern associated with concern's probably even too strong of a word. My level of mild consternation, if I can go that far, about specifically the Bills' passing attack and the chart, things like that, is not even in the same zip code as that to my third down defense, because I think sample size is the thing on my side when it comes to the third down defense, and it's not on the side of the people who, are concerned about the passing chart.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to be concerned over the approach that they had in that game, especially when you remember that they had only 3 days of preparation, that it was a short week, and that it's also a wonky divisional game, and those things matter. And I think what that kind of proved to me in the case of Joe Brady and his approach to this game, it's something that he kind of called out with Josh Allen's approach to the game and what he wanted to see and what they obviously could have done, but really pointing out more of the results. It was a game where when you have a short amount of time to prepare, you're not going to try and go out there and risk it all on every play. Like, you want to be as efficient as possible, given the nature of this offense. That's what they strive themselves for, what they pride themselves on, what they go for. You want to be as efficient as possible, but you also want to limit mistakes. That's just the biggest thing. And that's what this offense has turned into. And I think that this is just another example of this offense kind of taking that next step, where we are so used to seeing a Josh Allen that has just consistently gone for the throw, consistently rolled the dice. And it's been fun, but it's also gotten him into trouble. And I think that this is just a byproduct of the next step in Josh Allen's evolution as a quarterback, of being a safer player. It's as simple as that. And I don't even think it was a matter of like he was too cautious with the ball. I think it was just correct decisions and live to fight another down. And we are going to put ourselves in positions where we can actually make this play because we don't have as many yards to go for. And a lot of the times, too, yesterday, if there was an issue with the drive, it really stemmed from self-sabotage. I mean, you could talk about that Matt Prater botched kick that stopped them from getting 3 extra points on the board. You could talk about the early holding penalty that ended up negating a big play, and they were ending up 10 yards behind the line of script, or I'm sorry, 10 yards behind the sticks. This is an offense that, yes, execution errors happened, and yes, it was frustrating to see in real time, but they still performed, and they performed pretty well, and they were pretty efficient. So I'm not going to sit here and be worried about it. I think if we continue down the path of, okay, the run's getting solved and they have no, vertical threat, which is a problem that we had last year because of the inability to beat man coverage, then I could sit here and say, yeah, I'm a little more worried about it. But I would like to see this offense again against the Saints, a full week of preparation, and let's see how often they're going downfield if they even really need to. Because at that point, if they're forced to have to and they can't, that's when you and I could say, hey, I'm a little more worried about it. And if that trend continues, then you have a large enough sample size to pull away that concern and say, hey, I'm actually worried about this offense. But I can't look at yesterday as the glaring example, even with those stalled out drives. And I appreciate that point, Bruce, because I think rhythm of a game and like game feel, like if you score 50 points, you score 50 points. If you score 31 points, like in most cases, that should be enough to win. How you do it matters to some degree, but you ultimately did it and you should win with that result. And that's what the Bills did. And they took advantage of the fact that this Miami offense was having long drives. And this is a defense that eventually is going to get that punch back with a turnover. It's going to piss you off when you watch it, but that's what they do. That's the result. And I think the offense played a major role, of course, in getting a much needed win. And I'm very happy to see it. So I actually do want to delve in a little more into the offense with you, Bruce, and just get a little more specific. And really, I want to start with the rushing attack for this team because that's just the bread and butter. It's been the most fun thing to watch. I mean, what are your thoughts on just 3 games so far of seeing, 13 personnel, 12 personnel, just the absolute dominance from guys like it's Jackson Hawes, but also Dawson Knox laying the hammer down, Reggie Gilliam getting involved. I mean, what has been your takeaway from this Bills running game? James Cook in tandem with them. Are you a fan? Do you think that this is sustainable? I mean, I want to hear what you have to say about this topic.
Yeah, I do think it's sustainable. I think it's sustainable because, ironically enough, I think Jackson Hawes is a bigger piece than we think he is. And I think the reason that is, I mentioned it on my own show last week, I think, was when I was talking about Jackson Hawes and the idea that he's not just a sixth offensive lineman. I used a quantifiable example. I said, okay, let's say you have a sixth offensive lineman. And let's say on a scale from 1 to 10 that he's an 8 in blocking, but he's a 1 in receiving because, of course, he is. He's an offensive lineman. That makes complete sense. If you have a player like Jackson Hawes and you can say he's a 7 in blocking, but a 4 in receiving, then that changes the math a lot. Like, you're getting a slightly less blocking, but you're getting a decent chunk in additional receiving. And what that means is that you can legitimately go 13 personnel and you still have receiving threats. I mean, Dawson Knox, listen, I know he's not a natural catcher of the football, and I know we have a conversation about him being an overpriced player relative to what he provides the team, but he's still a really, 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 really good athlete. And so you still have to at least threaten for the idea that he could still run a route. Dalton Kincaid, we know, can run routes. Dalton Kincaid consistently this year has performed and very quietly has led the team in receptions 2 of the first 3 games. And then Jackson Hall is making 1 or 2 catches that you make you think, okay, well, he's not just an offensive lineman. And so when you go 13, you can manipulate specific situations to lead it to be that you can still do what you need to do to be able to get, you know, individual bunch formations going in the run game, but you can also spread it out if you want to pass it. You can go 13 and you don't have to do it tight. You can go 13 and space it out a little bit. And one of those players is Dalton Kincaid. And so it's a personnel matching nightmare because typically you want to match 13 with base, right? You want to match for 13 with base, but that means you have to cover Dalton Kincaid with a linebacker.
Yeah.
And that's how you win. You go by covering Dalton Kincaid with a linebacker. That was one of the big conversations about Dalton Kincaid when he came out was how does he become a matchup piece? Ironically enough, Jackson Hawes helps Dalton Kincaid be a matchup piece. And I know that sounds weird
Absolutely.
and roundabout, but it's a real thing. And that's why it's sustainable. It's sustainable in the run game because the personnel allows you to still do things in the pass game.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that because that's kind of why I brought the topic up too. Because I think the biggest benefactor, like the happiest person with Jackson Hall's presence on that line, is Dalton Kincaid. Because and I've said this on the show, I had my concerns about Dalton Kincaid's blocking ability, whether that would take a step forward, whether he'd stay healthy, whether he'd get favorable matchups, whether they'd have to be in a bind because maybe he's not capable of blocking well and he's more limited in how you show him pre to post snap, lining out wide again. I think having a guy like Jackson Hawes, who is just more than capable of being a dominant blocker in the NFL for a very long time, someone that you can use to take on the heavier linemen or the linebackers or whoever you see fit in that situation. That is the best case scenario for a guy like Dalton Kincaid. And it's the best case scenario for the Bills offense because now, even if you want to say Kincaid's blocking hasn't taken a massive step forward, but rather he's just being matched up with, smaller bodies like DBs that he can handle a bit more, which you've seen these first couple of weeks. He's still a good route runner and he's still going to get opportunity in those looks. And I think the fact that the Bills know this now, it just creates this really fun dynamic and a bind you put defenses in because now you're never going to know, right? If they're going to just send Kincaid out for a deeper route, if they're going to run the ball, if they're going to use Dawson Knox, who's a capable hands, if they're going to use Jackson Hawes, even, who's gotten a couple of receptions in his first few weeks, one being a touchdown, one being almost a touchdown, but a very clutch catch. They're proving that all three of these tight ends have some sort of threat as pass catchers, but are also just menacing in the run game and blocking extremely well. And that's just a huge boost for this Bills offense. And even if you want to say, man, I'm really worried about the downfield passing or whatever, I still think that this is a great fallback to go to if you want to be productive in a game. And I think it's going to lend itself well all season for these guys. And I think especially colder months in Buffalo, tougher weather, road games, talking about the playoffs and that kind of championship DNA or winning football, I think that this is the backbone of it. I think it's something that can propel them through the playoffs if they need it. So I'm just so happy to see it. I've been raving about Jackson Hall since they drafted him. I've been a huge fan of the pick. People on this show know I was a huge fan of the pick. I have been calling him Killdozer since we drafted him. And I think the nickname is earned. It's not just hype anymore, man. He's a part of this Bills offensive identity. He's a part of what they're doing. He is just a fun player getting the praise he deserves, but it's not just smoke. This man can block his ass off. And it really it helps everything. So I'm happy to see it. Bruce, I want to toss it back to you for one more thing on the offense, and that's just going back to the passing game. I mean, it's point of discussion, I guess, because when you see the stall drives, you kind of ask yourselves this question. You wonder if it has anything to do with concerns from last year, if it's Joe Brady. But I just want to hear your thoughts on the receiving room so far. And you could talk about last night. You could talk about these three games that the Bills have played. I still am a fan of the room. I still think the room has plenty of potential, and we haven't seen its best ball yet. Are you aligned with that? Do you feel more worry for it? Do you feel more excitement? How are you on the receiving core right now?
I feel better about the receiving core this year than I did last year. I think it's a more talented room. I think there's a more diverse skill set in this room this year. I do think that the situation with Josh Palmer is something that needs to be discussed, because I do think he was brought in to help with that intermediate and vertical routes. And I do think that that is something that hasn't really been utilized that much. I will say, after week one of the big conversations around the fantasy football community was like, hey, is Keon Coleman becoming that guy? Right? Is he becoming the dude? And I think that that was probably a little overblown. I think the circumstances surrounding the comeback were leaning themselves toward that. And I think that the other situation is that they're going to continue to rotate. That's just the way it works, right? The Bills, everyone wants to say who's the wide receiver one for the Bills. I don't think the room is so different this year that all of a sudden someone's going to emerge as a 150 target player. I don't think that's a thing. So I know that we all want that to happen with somebody just because it makes things a little easier and gives us simpler things to talk about, frankly. But that's just not, it's not going to happen. That doesn't mean it's not more talented than it was last year.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I like the room. I see plenty of potential for the room. I think I guess if you want to call it, ceiling of the room raises substantially if Keon Coleman takes that next step. After week one, and Bruce, I'm just gonna ask, can you hear me? Because I can't, I think my screen froze.
Yes, I can hear you. Your screen did freeze. I will say you
All
look
right.
very pensive in your screen
Okay.
freeze. We have
At
like
least I look.
the thinking man for Joe DeRosa right now.
So I want to preface, or not even preface, this happened one other time on this show, and I don't know why. Even if I take myself off the screen and come back, it's still frozen. So you guys are just going to get the thinker Joe for the rest of the show, apparently. Anyways, at least you can hear me, and that's the important part. I think that this receiving core is still talented, and like I said, ceiling raises substantially if Keon Coleman takes that next step. I think they are well equipped with different skill sets, and I really liked what I saw from Elijah Moore yesterday. I think when you want to talk about like back end of the wide receiver room gadget guy, I was a big proponent of not trading Curtis Samuel, and then I think it's still Samuel's role. The Bills obviously feel differently. They've given Elijah Moore way more run, and he's done quite well with it. And I think that makes me feel a bit better about the room too. But I would like to see more consistent downfield push if that is a part of the game plan from this receiving core, specifically Josh Palmer. Again, week one, he showed it a little bit, but I really want to see more examples of trusting him against man coverage and winning and getting separation. The Jets game last week, the Mitch Trubisky single rep, he does make a huge play, and that is very important. But ultimately, I think we're sitting here saying, feeling a little bit better about it, not totally there yet. I think in a few weeks, we'll have a better, I guess, like more reps from each player, a higher amount of games to work off of where we'll feel better about it. But right now, I mean, again, this is a game where they still score 31 points. I can't take too much or throw too many jabs at this offense. They're doing what they need to do. They're winning the games. Receiving core be damned. I still think that the backbone of this team is one that can win in January and hopefully February, but I would like to see it, I guess, give us more examples of improvement from last year to this year. So that's nice to see. Bruce, before we move on to defense, any final thoughts at all on this offense that you feel like we didn't cover, didn't touch, anything you want to say?
There is an opportunity for this offense to be the most diverse and the most balanced that we've seen thus far during the McBean Josh Allen era of football. And I think that that's a good thing. I think that that helps you with your game planning. I think it helps you match up with multiple different types of defenses and offenses and other teams and control the pace of the game and all the things you want to do to be able to generate the kind of balanced attack that will allow you to game plan specifically for teams. I think that this gives you an opportunity to do that. To be honest, I kind of feel like the whole concept of you having like an identity as an offense, and I know that Joe dropped off, so I'm just going to go ahead and start monologuing here for a minute. But it's like we're going to do like the Incredibles, like, oh no, you caught me monologuing. We're going to do that.
I
But
think we're okay now, Bruce. I've just been playing with it. I apologize. I don't
no,
know why that happened.
cool. But what I was saying was I truly think the idea of having an identity on offense is vastly overrated. I do. I think the more things you can do on offense, the better off you are. And I think this offense has a chance because of the addition of Josh Palmer, because of the addition of Jackson Hawes. I think it's just kind of filling out the edges of this offense a little bit. So for me, I think there's an opportunity here. I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm excited about the opportunities for this offense to be as well balanced and as well fleshed out as any offense that they've had since it's been McBean.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I like the balance. You could still hear me, right? I
I
apologize.
can.
This is happening. This is so annoying. But anyways, I agree with you. I do like, in my opinion, having something that I guess you could say is intimidating for defenses to face. But I also think that's just Josh Allen. Like,
Yeah.
you talk about identities with teams. I think the identity for the Bills is Josh Allen, and that's
Yeah.
okay. I mean, you look at championship teams of the past, I could talk about dynasties of the past too, and we could talk about even the Chiefs now. We could talk about the Patriots of the past. Yes, there were talented players. I'm not trying to downplay the impact of guys like Rob Gronkowski or guys like Travis Kelce or whoever. But when you thought of those teams, you thought of the biggest threat being Patrick Mahomes, being Tom Brady. So, like, yeah, it's great to have numerous ways to beat people, but it's also great to have that one thing that works for you. But you got Josh Allen, and Josh Allen plays at a high enough level that elevates whatever scheme you want to put around him, whatever type of team you want to play, whatever type of ball you want to play. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh man, like I wish they could do this, or I wish they really had something. Win the game however you fit. Win the game however you feel the need to. And if you can, then we're in good shape. So now, as we both, I want to say that this is kind of a tribute to Bruce Nolan on this episode. I don't have a camera anymore. Maybe psychic magic to take my camera's ability away, so now we could both be floating orbs here. This is I can't even describe what movie this reminds me of, but I'm picturing a scene in my head. I do want to move on over to the defense. I want, we talked about third down defense, so we can get back to it if we want, but I want to go with this first, and that's the defensive line starting up front. My takeaway from watching them closely was highs and lows for the interior defensive line. I thought there were numerous really nice plays for guys like Deion Walker and Daquan Jones. I thought that the pass rush left something to be desired. I do think that a part of that had to do with certain moments where Tua was getting the ball out quickly, but that wasn't the case when you look at an overall game standpoint. Joe Marino cited this on Twitter. Tua's time to throw was 2.74 seconds, and it was the slowest he has been in delivering the ball since week 14 of 2023. So this wasn't a game where Tua was throwing the ball at a substantially fast pace. And yet, in the times that you could exploit him holding the ball, it felt like the pass rush couldn't hit home consistently enough. That is at least my takeaway from it. Bruce, do you agree with that, or do you feel differently upon looking at them?
No, so I went back and watched everything today, and I thought to myself, how have the Bills gotten to Tua in the past? And Tua is really, as we've established before, Tua is an accurate thrower of the football on his first read in rhythm. And the book on Tua is if you take away his first read, he doesn't have the creation ability to be able to work full field progressions from a second, third, fourth read and be able to make adjustments in the pocket to pressure, deal with that, and make a play out of structure. That's just not his thing. And so it really is a coverage helps your pass rush with Tua. Because historically speaking, when you can get him to hold the ball, you get home.
Mhm.
Why? Because he's a quick thrower of the football. But that just didn't happen for the Buffalo Bills. And that's because he wasn't really needing to do those things. And there was occasions where he actually did break, contain, and make a play down the field,
Yeah.
and Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle would be able to help him out. And that is unusual. In addition, some of those convoy screens that you see actually aren't quick throws, which is funny because you assume a screen is going to be a quick throw. That's just a natural assumption. But the way that Miami does it is they specifically run off your coverage and then come in underneath it with usually a tight end that swings
Mhm.
out in parallel to their running back, and they just kind of let it go. Well, those screens are going to continue to work unless you can get upfield and force Tua to have to change his platform or throw it early or things like that. And that didn't happen. So the coverage wasn't making him hold it long enough. And when he
Yeah.
did hold it long enough, they weren't getting quick wins from their defensive line. And Gregory Rousseau has never been a quick win guy. Like, that's not his thing. I'm going to win really fast. Like the things you see from Joey Bosa against the Jets, the things you saw, occasion flashes from Deion Walker against the Dolphins, like that's not what Gregory Rousseau does. but he's been kind of absent the last couple of weeks. And when you have a player like Ed Oliver out, you have a player like Daquan Jones aging, you have two rookies on the inside, you have Joey Bosa who's still not playing a full complement of snaps. You Somebody's got to win.
Yeah.
And so that has not been Greg Rousseau. That's been a struggle. And I think all these things in combination, that what I'm describing, that on plays where the coverage made him hold it, they didn't get home. And on the plays where you needed to get a quick win, you didn't get a quick win. So
Yeah.
all those things happened. We talk about coverage marrying with pass rush. Those things just weren't in sync against the Miami Dolphins. On moments when you needed somebody to get a win, they didn't get a win. It almost felt like everybody was letting somebody down in that situation.
Yeah, that's kind of how I see it too, because that marriage is important. We've talked about it. Plenty of people have pointed it out how important it is to have those two things in tandem. Because you get a quarterback to hold the ball, then it doesn't matter if you get the quick win, as long as you can complete. Then there you go. You have a pass rush that's capable of hitting home, creating a threat, and all of a sudden you have complementary defense. That was kind of the thing that I guess made me frustrated yesterday, because you look at the raw stats and the Bills, they held Miami to 21 points. They had numerous stall drives, and there were positives from this game. And I'm not saying it was all bad. Again, I think there were some wins from the interior defensive line. I think that final play, that turnover from Terrell Bernard, was a great example of that marriage in action, when you have Deion Walker get into Tua's face and force him to kind of hurry up and release that ball, and Terrell Bernard can jump the route effectively. And he even gets his hand on it a little, like, I think it was like a very, very subtle tip on the ball. But still, I mean, you create that threat. And there were also other times in the game where, hey, pressure into his face forces an errant throw. That can happen with this team. It's not impossible. It just wasn't consistent enough. And I think that's where my pain point was, because I was watching closely this defensive line. Here's a true 3rd and long. Can we get off the field? And it just wasn't fast enough, and the coverage couldn't hold up long enough to be able to be consistent and stall these drives out. And again, I'm complaining about a 21-point game, so I understand this. People are going to be like, what are you talking about? Like, this wasn't that bad, and I get it. But if I'm talking about this defense in kind of what I would say are my main concerns, like with those in mind for later in the season when they play, again, higher caliber teams in January and potentially February. Like, these are the things you have to clean up. That marriage does have to be more consistent. It does have to be in place. And I thought that, that pass rush component, when they did have their opportunity to kind of quell your worry, they just didn't come through enough until the moment it mattered, which is still very good. So I would just like to see, I guess for me, someone who had been optimistic about this pass rush, someone who had said, I think it's going to be really good this season, just more out of it in those moments. And if you can give me that as the season goes on, then good. And I will say this, because this has been pointed out in our chat. It's been pointed out by numerous people. We are getting players back. And I do think that we have to keep in mind Michael Hoyt, Larry Ogunjobi are going to be very big additions for this defensive line, how multiple they can be, how much pressure they can generate. So I'm left with questions. I'm left with concerns. We talked about the third down defense, but they still got it done. They still came through in the clutch, and they still proved that if you have an identity of this defense, if you think there is one you can point out, it's havoc, it's turnover opportunity, and it's creating chances and takeaways in key moments. And that's what they did. So Bruce, any other things you want to note about this defense before we wrap it up? Because I feel like we've covered a lot here.
No, I'm good. I think we covered everything we need to really cover. I think what you're seeing is you're seeing the antithesis of complementary pass rush and pass defense. And so whenever people talk about what complementary is, like, I know everyone gets sick of hearing about complementary football and complementary. I think a great example of what it wasn't is watching the Bills defense against the Dolphins. That's a great example. I don't know if we want to have a term for it, like anti-complimentary, maybe insulting defense, like
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, right? Being not on the same page, that's what it looks like. And I think that that's
Yeah.
a big takeaway from this. It's a good example that when we start talking about stuff later, it's a little bit like the conversation about, the Supreme Court when they talk about I don't want to use the word because it's a family friendly show, but they say they're trying to evaluate what is vulgar essentially. And they say, well,
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it. Right. It's not that.
Yeah. It's you could call it a divorce of pass rushing coverage,
There you
maybe.
go. Divorce of pass rush.
I think that's a better term for it. But yeah, and it's not to say that it can't get better, but these things rear their heads from last season, and you have to start wondering when you'll start seeing it more consistently. Because I understand, like, yeah, it's 1 week. Yeah, it's isolated. It's been 4 days. And I agree. It's a short week. It's a divisional game, but it's not going to get easier for this team if they want to go on a deep playoff run. So having that standard of hope that they can really get in sync more often in these types of games, especially against teams that are kind of quote unquote matchup nightmares for them, I'd like to see it more. The only other thing I wanted to say before we signed off is I think Trey White, there's a simultaneous like concern and non-concern for him. I'm not losing my mind over it. I did think that there were times where I'm like, man, why are you manned up against Jalen Waddle? It really sucks to see because I don't think he's that fast these days. But I think I wouldn't call it a demise of the player. I think we all know he's a vet. He's older. He's coming off injuries, and that speed isn't there. I think when they bring Hairston back, I am really excited to see the matchup for him when you talk about speedier receivers, because I think that'll be a better opportunity. Even again, if he's not refined but has to compensate by using his speed, he can still win in ways like that. So that was just the other thing I wanted to mention, Bruce. But I think we covered everything. This was still a fun game, as tense as it was. The Bills come away with the win. They now have the 10-day rest period where they can go back into the Saints game, hopefully refreshed, refocused, and ready to kick some ass. I hope they do, Bruce, because I will be there. It is the first time I'm going to be back in Buffalo since 2021. So I'm hoping for a good, clean Bills win. I'm so excited to be back. Bruce, I was excited to have you. You're an amazing guest, and I will give you the opportunity to say good night to the people and tell them what you got going on. The floor is yours, my friend.
Sounds good, Joe. Well, thanks for having me, first off. And I appreciate everybody being here. If for some reason you listen to the show and you want, for some reason, to listen to more of my stuff, you can find me anywhere you find your podcasts. The Bruce Exclusive is the show, and you can follow me at Bruce Exclusive on socials.
Yeah. And you should check out the Bruce Exclusive because his show is incredible and he will give you insight that I don't think you find from many people in this space as far as the creativity in his show goes, as far as the angles he takes. I appreciate the work that Bruce does, and it is well worth your time. So check him out. Check us out on everywhere you stream. If you could not catch us live, I appreciate you listening on audio platforms. Tell your friends about Cover One, our YouTube channel, and everything we got going on. Sign up for the One Pass in the description below, as it is the lifeblood of our network. It gives us access to all of the resources that we use on a day-to-day basis for all of you. Again, my apologies for the technical difficulties tonight. I have no idea what's going on. I just like to think that, again, Bruce used his spectral powers to attack my camera and make me an orb just like him. But that's okay, because honestly, sometimes I like not being on camera. I feel like I could think more freely. None of you can see what I'm doing, which is just desperately trying to drink a soda that is broken. But everybody, thank you again for tuning in. Be sure to drop a like on your way out. Share this video with your friends. Tell them what we got going on. I hope you enjoyed the win and enjoy the rest of your weekend and football Sundays and Saturdays if you're a college fan. We'll see you next week. And as always, go Bills. Thanks, everybody. Take care.